The error 8134 divide by 0 error encountered happens whenever the denominator of any division expression evaluates to exactly 0. Take for example in this query. If we run this query, this expression down here will fire error 8134 because the sum of quantity evaluates to 0 on a particular row. So that's why we have this error down here. If you see, the query is already executing up to a point when it encountered this situation and then fires error 8134. So let's have a closer look at the data. Perhaps we can spot this particular row that is causing this issue. So if we go down, we are trying to divide sales sum by quantity. So somewhere in the quantity column there will be a 0. So it's here. We're trying to divide 14 by 0. So we will encounter error 8134. In the next query, we will try to exclude this row and then run the query again to see if it will work. Just to prove that this 0 here, it's the culprit. So if I run this query where I have clearly excluded sales ID 13, the query is going to work. As we can see, the query works right now because we've excluded the row where quantity is equal to 0. So, but that is not how to deal with the situation. How to deal with the situation, one way is to use the NULLIF function. So before we go into that, just to prove that it happens with every type of numeric type, here we have an int. We're trying to divide 100 by 0. We'll get the error. Here is where we've casted 0 as a float. We're encountering the same error. And then for decimals as well, the same error. And then how do we solve the problem? To solve the problem, it is good practice to always wrap the denominator in the NULLIF function. So the NULLIF function has a format NULLIF expression 1, expression 2. And what happens is that the NULLIF function returns a null if both arguments are equal. In other words, if expression 1 and expression 2 are equal, the function returns a null. So why are we doing this? The thing is that in SQL Server, if the denominator is a null instead of a 0, then you do not get error 8134. So if we try it, in other words, what we are saying is this. If you say select 100 divided by null, you do not get the same error message. Instead, you get a null. So what NULLIF is doing here is, remember we said if expression 1 and 2 matches, it will return a null. So we are staying here in this particular place. If 0 is equal to 0, return a null. So in other words, what you are getting is actually this. So if you run this query, we are not going to get the error. Instead, we get a null. So what's the best way to avoid getting error 8134 then is to wrap your denominator whenever you are doing a division in a NULLIF, like we are going to be doing down here. So this is the same formula that we try to run up there, but now wrapped in a NULLIF. So if we say here, if I bring this down a bit so that it can be clear, if we run this same query, now everything works, because whenever it encounters a null, it is going to try to do this comparison and say, if the quantity equals 0, then let the whole of this denominator be a null. So you never have that error message anymore. So in the query we ran before, if we take this as an example and go up there, remember the query we ran earlier on where we ran into the problem? If we go back up there, and then instead of this line, we now put this. If we now wrap the denominator with a NULLIF, I brought this here for as an example. If I put it down here for reference, and I now say that if you exchange, and I now say sum of cells NULLIF the whole of that 0, we will now see. So it's essentially what we are saying is, let me convert this best practice to uppercase. What we are saying is, if the summation that you have performed equals 0. Then let the whole of this denominator be a null. So in that way, we are never going to have that problem anymore. And that's how you use NULLIF to solve the problem of error 8134, where the denominator equals 0 and your query blows up.